I get a lot of messages from people who are on the fence about splurging on a flagship gaming laptop. They worry they'll end up with a machine that looks amazing on paper but turns into a daily burden overheating in the living room, a battery that dies before a single match, or a price tag that never justifies the extra frames per second. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. In this review, I'm going to walk through what the MSI Crosshair 18 actually feels like when you plug it in, run a few typical gaming sessions, and use it for the kind of creative work many gamers double down on, so you can decide if it's a genuine upgrade or just another pricey hype machine. First, let's talk about the category you're buying into. High-end gaming laptops have, for the past few years, tried to squeeze desktop-class performance into a 2-kilogram chassis. The promise is simple: you get the raw horsepower to run the latest titles at max settings, a display that can actually keep up with high frame rates, and enough ports to turn the laptop into a portable workstation. The trade-off is usually heat, battery life, and a price that borders on a small desktop tower. The Crosshair 18 lands squarely in that sweet spot, but the real question is whether the compromises line up with your actual use case. The first thing you notice when you open the box is the 18-inch QHD Plus IPS panel, a 25601440 screen that can push 240 Hz. In a gaming context, that means you'll actually see the benefit of a high refresh rate if you pair it with a GPU that can sustain that speed. I tried a fast-paced shooter at 144 Hz on medium-high settings and the image stayed buttery smooth, there was no stutter, and the extra pixel density made distant textures feel clearer than on a typical 1080p panel. For creative work, say you're cutting footage in DaVinci Resolve or editing photos in Lightroom, the extra real estate helps you keep toolbars visible without sacrificing game window size. The downside is the size. At 18 inches the laptop is wider than most 15-inch machines, and it pushes the overall footprint to a size that can feel cramped on small desks or in cramped backpack compartments. Under the hood, the Crosshair 18 packs Intel's Core Ultra 9275HX, a 5.4 GHz top-end chip that MSI markets as ultimate performance. In practice, the CPU delivers the kind of headroom you need for streaming while you play. I ran a typical OBS setup, captured a 1080p stream at 60 frames per second, and the CPU usage never spiked above 70%. That means you can have a microphone, webcam, and game overlay running simultaneously without the system choking. Pair that with the NVIDIA RTX 5078 GB GDDR7 GPU, and you're looking at a graphics card that sits just a notch below the RTX 4090 in desktop form. In the titles I tested, Cyberpunk 2077, Elden Ring, and Call of Duty Warzone, the RTX 5070 kept most settings on Ultra while delivering 7090 frames per second at the native 1440p resolution. The extra frame buffer of GDDR7 also helped with texture loading in open-world games, so you didn't see the pop-in that cheaper laptops sometimes exhibit. Storage and memory feel generous, 32 GB of DDR5 RAM and a 2 TB NVMe SSD. The RAM is fast enough that loading times in large games barely register, and the SSD gives you a whole library of titles without constantly managing space. If you're a content creator who also needs to store raw footage, the 2 TB is a comfortable baseline, and you can always add a secondary drive via the secondary M.2 slot that MSI includes. The real benefit here is not just raw capacity but the speed. Large texture packs in games like Red Dead Redemption 2 streamed in without hitch, and my video export times were noticeably shorter compared to a 16GB 8GB configuration I've used in the past. Connectivity is where the Crosshair 18 tries to future-proof your workflow. Thunderbolt 4 appears as a USB-C port that can handle 40 gigabits per second, meaning you can dock the laptop to a 4K monitor, attach an external GPU enclosure, or use a fast RAID array for video work without bottlenecking. Wi-Fi 6E adds low latency, high throughput wireless that shines in dense apartment buildings where older routers would struggle. In my apartment, the ping in online matches dropped a few milliseconds when I switched from my old 802.11 AC router to a Wi-Fi 6E access point, which isn't a game changer but is a nice polish for people who game on the go. Audio is a surprising highlight. MSI partnered with Dynaudio to put two upward-firing speakers behind the chassis.